Welcome to this video. Today, we will uncover a story that shocked an entire nation. A tale of a young girl, a horrifying crime, and a mystery that unfolded in the streets of Skopje, North Macedonia. This is the story of Vanya Georgievska, a 14-year-old girl whose disappearance and murder shook her community to its core. We will take you through the events from her final morning to the chilling details of her abduction, the investigation that followed, and the shocking revelations that came to light in one of the most disturbing crime cases in the country's history. Yeah, prepare yourself for a story that is dark, tragic, and haunting. A story of innocence lost, of evil carefully planned, and of a community left grappling with grief and questions that may never be fully answered. Begins days earlier, on 22nd November. On a quiet street on the outskirts of Veles, assailants forced their way into the home of a man named Pancho Zhizhovsky. The accounts that emerged were disturbing. He was attacked, bound, and put into a vehicle. The attackers drove him to a remote area near the village of Rudnik, a place described by locals as isolated and difficult to reach. There, investigators later say, Zhizhovsky's life was taken. His body was found discarded in a deep pit. Crucially, authorities seized a Citroën registered to Zhizhovsky, a car that, according to subsequent findings, would reappear in the events that followed. 2 days later, on 24 November, his family reported him missing. The disappearance set off local inquiries, interviews with neighbors, and the first threads of a darker pattern. Then came 27 November, an otherwise ordinary winter morning in Skopje. At about 07:25 a.m., Vanya left her apartment to walk to school. She was a child with the routines of a teenager: breakfast, a backpack, the short walk to class. By 07:27 a.m., witnesses later said, something happened at the entrance of her building. Authorities reconstructed the scene from CCTV footage, witness statements, and mobile phone records. Vanya was accosted at the block's doorway. In a matter of minutes, she was no longer where she should have been. Two vehicles, a Citroën and a Renault Kangoo, were observed leaving the area together. The Citroën was later linked to Zhizhovsky. The last signal from Vanya's phone was registered near her family home on Partizansky Odred Boulevard at roughly 7:30 a.m. Her mother, unaware of any of this, left the apartment about 10 minutes after her daughter. The ordinary morning had already been shattered. By 8:20 a.m., concern turned to alarm when Vanya's teacher called to say she had not arrived for class. At 8:35 a.m., the mother filed a missing persons report. Volunteers gathered. Social media exploded with appeals. The city, and then the country, awaited any sign, any hint, any good news. Police would later state that by the time the missing person report was filed, the kidnappers were already on the road toward the village of Brazda, carrying Vanya in the trunk. According to the eventual reconstruction, she had been restrained and placed inside a sleeping bag, a chilling detail that investigators say was confirmed during interrogation of the suspects. From this point onward, the timeline becomes even more unsettling. At approximately 10 a.m., just 2.5 hours after Vanya left her home, police say the abductors carried out the unthinkable. What happened in those hours has been pieced together from phone data, forensic work, and statements taken long after the fact. But even with those pieces, the full truth remains difficult to absorb. Meanwhile, her family, unaware of the tragedy already unfolding, continued the frantic search. At 11 a.m., Vanya's father formally reported her missing, and at 12:08 p.m., her mother posted a desperate public plea on social media, a message that spread across the country within minutes. Thousands joined the search, both online and on the ground. For many, this was no longer the disappearance of a stranger's child. It felt personal. It felt urgent. But as the hours passed, no answers came. 28 November brought no breakthroughs. Police combed wooded areas, checked abandoned buildings, and followed every tip, no matter how uncertain. Social networks filled with speculation, amateur theories, and false sightings. The public waited, sleepless and anxious. Then came 29 November, the moment the case crossed borders. Interpol issued notices expanding the search beyond North Macedonia. Authorities acknowledged the possibility that those responsible might already be attempting to flee. For the first time, the public realized that this case was larger, more coordinated, and far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. On 30 November, attention shifted again. Reports emerged that the main suspect, Ljupcho Palevsky, widely known by the nickname Palcho, had left for Belgrade in a Škoda Superb, accompanied by his lawyer. The explanation offered was curious: medical checks. But the timeline raised eyebrows. His lawyer later claimed he'd dropped Palevsky at a hotel and returned to Skopje. If true, it meant that one of the key individuals connected to the case had quietly slipped out of the country just as the investigation was gaining momentum. The next day, 1 December, the trail stretched even further. According to authorities, Palevsky and an associate identified as Stefan D. continued their journey, departing Serbia in a Land Rover, crossing into Bulgaria, and then exiting toward Turkey through the Kapitan Andreevo checkpoint. Investigators believe the suspect was ultimately transported to the Turkish city of Balıkesir, a detail that would later trigger international cooperation between Macedonian, Serbian, Bulgarian, and Turkish authorities. But while he moved across borders, the investigation at home was accelerating rapidly. And then came 3rd December, the day everything changed. On the outskirts of Skopje, in a secluded area, Vanya's body was discovered. Hours later, investigators also located the body of Pancho Zhozhovsky near Rudnik. 2 victims, 2 locations, 1 deeply connected timeline. The news swept the country in a wave of grief, disbelief, and anger. But the discovery of the bodies did not bring clarity. It only raised more questions. How were the murders linked? What was the true motive? Who planned the abduction, and why? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, could any of this have been prevented? These were the uncertainties that would dominate the days and weeks ahead, as arrests were made, confessions were taken, and the full machinery of the investigation turned toward uncovering the truth behind one of the most shocking criminal cases in recent history. In the days that followed the grim discoveries, the investigation shifted from a desperate search to a painstaking reconstruction of a crime that shocked an entire nation. One by one, the pieces began to lock into place. Police arrested several individuals, men whose paths had crossed in strange and unsettling ways. Among them were Velibor Manev, Bortsa Videvsky, Vlatko Keshishev, and the man believed to be at the center of it all, Ljupcho Palevsky, known as Palcho. The public demanded answers. Who were these men, and why would they commit such horrific acts? When authorities finally explained what they believed happened, the truth was almost too senseless to believe. Investigators alleged that the group operated with a single, crude motive: greed. According to the prosecution, the men had devised a plan to kidnap a child, not out of hatred, not out of personal revenge, but for money. They intended to demand a ransom by targeting someone they believed came from a family that could be pressured, manipulated, or exploited. To execute their plan, they needed a vehicle that couldn't be traced back to them. That is where Pancho Zhozhovsky entered their deadly orbit. Police say he was killed not because of who he was, but because of what he owned: a Citroen his attackers wanted to use for the kidnapping. A life taken for a car. A car taken for a ransom scheme. For Vanya, investigators believe the motive was equally cold-blooded. She was chosen because the group assumed they could profit by frightening a relative into paying. But nothing went according to their plan. According to statements later obtained by the police, once the search for Vanya exploded across Macedonia, panic set in. The kidnappers feared being caught. Their plan to extract money collapsed, and in that panic, they chose murder over exposure. Two innocent lives ended because things got out of control, one of the suspects reportedly said, a phrase as chilling as it is hollow. As the investigation progressed, the relationships between the killers became clearer. They were not masterminds or professionals. They were acquaintances bound by petty interests, criminal history, and desperation. Polevsky, portrayed as the ringleader, allegedly held sway over the others with promises of easy money. Menev and Videvsky, both with backgrounds in physical training and security work, were believed to have carried out much of the physical involvement. Kashishev, prosecutors argued, provided logistical support. Each man played a part. Each decision spiraled deeper into violence. In the end, the court would hand down one of the harshest verdicts in Macedonian legal history: life imprisonment for all four men. The judges concluded that the killings were planned, coordinated, and driven by pure greed, with no signs of remorse. For the families of Vanya and Pancho, no sentence could undo the devastation. A country mourned with them and wondered how an ordinary morning could unravel into such tragedy. But perhaps the most haunting lesson of this case is not just the cruelty of the crime, but how fragile the line can be between the everyday and the unthinkable. A stolen car, a reckless plan, a moment of panic, and two lives were taken, forever altering countless others. And that is the tragic truth behind one of the most disturbing cases North Macedonia has ever witnessed. A crime born of greed, carried out by men bound together by desperation, and ended only when the full weight of an entire nation demanded justice. Thank you for staying with me through this difficult and deeply unsettling story. Cases like this remind us how important it is to stay informed, to stay alert, and to stand together as a community when tragedy strikes. If you found this video informative and want to support the channel as we continue to cover major investigations, true crime stories, and real events from the region, make sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so you never miss an upload. Your support truly means a lot.